This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar. It's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. And thank you for being with me on this journey as we're all learning how to apply the ancient wisdom and knowledge of consciousness to modern day situations and circumstances. Thanks for being with me. So welcome to today's live webinar on healing our relationship with Source in order to heal all our relationships. The way I organize the beginning of the webinar is a little prayer of gratitude, and then an overview of what is energy healing for the new folks, and then a little review of yesterday's session, because I do a Friday night and then I do a Saturday morning. And the idea originally was to take in time zones all over the world. But what happened is these two sessions tend to build on each other. So it's good to take a look at some of the foundational work that we did last night. Hey, you made it. Yeah, taking the foundational work from last night and in order to really understand where we're going in today's session. And always the Saturday session is at a more practical level, more boots on the ground type of relationship with the knowledge, and lots of good healing work for everybody. So thanks for joining me for this relationship webinar. I'm really happy that everyone's here. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being us and being the whole webinar from its beginning to end. Thank you for being our ancestors, and for being the bridge between the absolute and the relative, between unmanifest source and the entire manifest expression of creation. Thank you for the ability to work concisely and efficiently and dig in to uncover those gems of wisdom and understanding and integrate that understanding so that all of us can master the energy healing process. All of us can meet the challenges that arise on a day-to-day level with grace and success and joy and all blessings, not only for ourselves, but for everyone else too. So thank you all so much for being with me. Okay, what is energy healing? Energy healing is a technology of consciousness, really. It is part of energy healing is a model for understanding how the body heals, how it really heals from the inside out, from consciousness to matter. And, you know, why is it that placebos work? You know, why is it that ultimately the body heals itself, and we use the technologies of Western medicine to augment our body's own ability to create those transformations which bring the body back to full health again? So energy healing is about understanding that. And the reason it's good and useful to understand those mechanics is because awareness or understanding, knowledge, focus of attention actually activates and enlivens that process. So the better we understand it, the better we really own those mechanics, the more effective we can be in healing our own physiology or other challenges like broken relationships or need of increased finances or whatever it is that needs to be healed, that can be healed more efficiently if we're really engaged in the process. And it's exciting. It's actually really fun to get in and engage with that process because it's nature's process. It's the process by which the creation creates everything. And so by going in and engaging with that process, we get a chance to participate, to like co-create. And align better with that deepest, most profound intelligence that's administrating the entire orderly, progressive creation. We evolve, we evolve. So that's the overview of what is energy healing. Energy healing is focusing our attention in a very concise and intentional and very, very precise manner in order to allow the liveliness of attention to touch our world and create specific effects. So it's like, what angle do you go in at, right? All right. So that's energy healing. Yesterday, foundation. Oh, goody. More people arriving. Even though it's an ice storm, people are actually coming over to my house. Amazing. I am amazed and honored. Anyway, yesterday, we went deeply into the first part of the title of this session, and that is healing the relationship with Source, because that is the foundation for healing all relationships. That's the first relationship. So in that section of our webinar, we took a deep look at the relationship between parts and wholeness and the parts, and really focus some attention on healing for the experience of separation, because separation is foundational to, I would say, all the problems, almost pretty much any problem that arises, whether it's health or relationships or manifesting or whatever. In all those areas, we can find the seed, we can follow back to the seed and find that somewhere along the lines, the experience of connection to Source was lost. So we looked at this element of separation, and one of the interesting finds was that separation is actually necessary, because nothing manifests as material form without this process occurring, this very important process where wholeness evolves within itself through its own manifesting process. And in order for wholeness to manifest as a diverse universe, there has to be some element of separation there. But the principle is that what we did in the healing work, the actual healing work, was to go in and work that junction between the point where wholeness opens out into the parts, as so that wholeness is not lost in that exponential expansion of diversity. And some really beautiful points came up yesterday. One of them was from our beloved audience insights. And one of those was this saying from the Upanishads, which I love, Anuraniyan Mahato Mahiyan? Mahiyan. Anuraniyan Mahato Mahiyan. And that means bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. And that point was brought up to help explain that the creation is bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest at the same time. Because there's the fact that if we think of the ocean as an analogy, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So the ocean is greater than all the waves, but the whole is contained in all the parts. And so the whole, being whole, not split up, contained in all the parts, makes the parts essentially greater than the sum of the parts. Because if the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but the whole is contained in all the parts, then that makes every single little wave essentially bigger than even the sum of the parts. So it's like a kind of paradox. So there was so you can see yesterday was very intellectual. We went in with the scalpel there to look deeply into these details. The two suggestions that were offered by my exquisite children on this, because they were raised with principles of Vedic science. One was that, could it be like a fractal, that the parts have a sort of fractal in relationship to the whole. So the whole is reflected in all the parts. The other suggestion that came up was that the parts are greater, the, the parts contain the whole because of their relationship to all the other parts. That because no part exists in isolation, every part has a connection to the whole, or is essentially the whole through by virtue of its connection. That it is its individual, but it is also connected, and therefore it really actually literally is the wholeness. And I think that's the, yeah, I know, right? Smart babies. We like smarty pants babies. Anyway, that's why we're doing this webinar on relationships. Yeah, thanks. Thanks from Ogden. All right, so yeah, so relationships. Today we want to talk a little bit more about personal relationships and personal human relationships. Human relationships have a tendency to be a little messy. It's just, it's just the way it is, right? In spite of all efforts to maintain order, the reality is that everyone's first relationship is with mother, and mother represents nature. Mother is that element of nature that supports the evolutionary process. The other thing about relationships is that relationships are the instrument of evolution. Remember wholeness? Diversifying to the parts and then folding back into wholeness, folding back into its own nature. It's by virtue of going through that diversification process that wholeness evolves. And so also we, first relationship is with mother, and mother is that, and I'm talking about kind of archetypal mother form. Mother is that form that represents the ability of nature to move outside the constraints of what we know. So we tend to identify that quality with chaos, but it's not really, I think the word chaos carries a little bit of negative connotation with it. But it's definitely stepping into new territory. And that's about where we ended yesterday's session, was the step into new territory, the movement into the unknown, because that's where evolution actually comes into manifestation, is when we are expanding past what we know and what is comfortable, essentially. Yes?
Did you say that was a step away from mother?
No, it's more of a step into mother, because mother really represents that quality, the archetypal form of mother. Like the archetypal form of father represents stability and order and resource and, you know, reliable, dependable. You can count it, you can measure it. Essentially, it's like fundamental and very stable, whereas mother represents this expansion out into, that's the absolute, right? The absolute, like Purusha, the absolute is, it's the same, it's consistent, it's non-changing, right? So it has that kind of orderly, non-changing, stable quality of expression, whereas mother is Prakriti, is the diversification out into the relative, and is like, well, messy, it's a little messy. It's like, it's a little like all over the place. So what we're doing in today's session is we're kind of diving into the mess a little bit and, and looking at some of the different ways in which we can meet relationship challenges based on a fundamental understanding of our own relationship with wholeness. And this really beautiful causal structure which came forward last night, which is, I think, essential, and that is the quality of pure potential. Not the pure potential of unmanifest being, which is as yet not manifest, but like the first expression of pure potential. Pure potential in its archetypal form, in its essential form. Because that expression of self is the closest expression that we have to understanding ourselves as being. And that's the thing that's still relative. It's the closest thing that we have that we can kind of self-identify. We did a lot of work between ego and intellect yesterday, because ego has been considered kind of a bad guy in New Age circles for a while now. You know, often until I've seen it. I've seen posts on all over the internet and videos and very wise people speaking, but saying, oh, you have to kill the ego, you have to destroy the ego, or saying, oh, there's nothing left here. There's no self. There's just amness, and myself is gone. Dorothy's no longer here. Well, hello, excuse me, excuse me, like I'm still here. Like, you know, so I mean, it's not, I don't mean to, I don't mean to discount what other people are saying, because I understand that they're coming from a level of having integrated consciousness with being. And so the being dominates. And so individuality doesn't dominate for them. So they're like, oh, well, individuality doesn't dominate. So it really, I see it as illusionary. And so in my opinion, it doesn't really exist. I would like to humbly offer the perspective that all of it is being, the manifest and the unmanifest. Thank you. Thank you for the validation. I got a hand raise over here. From California? Are you in California? Anyway, yeah, both together, both together. Oh, more hands raised. Yeah, that the whole thing is essential. The whole thing, oh, lots of hands raised. I love you guys. There is essential difference between ego and egoism, right? We need a strong ego, absolutely correct. And I think I covered that pretty thoroughly yesterday, but that's absolutely right. I think most people, when they use the word ego, are referring to the virtues or the values of an ego which is not grounded in wholeness. So like selfishness and narcissism and vanity and qualities like that. And so that's what people are thinking of as the ego. And those are kind of like the byproduct of a weak ego, essentially. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Oh, good. We're all on the same page, man. That's awesome. All right. So on that foundation, we dive into the field of relationships with other people. Oh, I love you guys. There's so many, getting a lot of raised hands over here to my people in the audience who can't see my screen. All right. So I was looking into relationships and kind of analyzing through my filter, because we each are looking at reality through our filter, and also working with my beautiful daughter who's in love. So, and looking at the nature of that type of relationship. I'm just organizing quickly, you guys. All right. All right. Beautiful. All right. So relationships. Relationships offer us an opportunity to understand ourselves. If ego is sense of self, we all start with a sense of self. When we are infants, our sense of self is that quality of pure potential, that quality which is closest to absolute pure being. We are pure potential, but we kind of don't really fully realize it because it hasn't been realized materially yet, right? So first relationship is with mother, and hopefully father, you have two parents, hopefully, are able to appreciate the purity and the value of that pure potential energy and help cultivate it, provide resources and opportunities to allow that quality to come to the foreground, and for the person to have experiences that validate and confirm and solidify and support that experience. Now, the thing about that pure potential experience, we analyzed it a bit yesterday, is that it contains change and transformation, evolutionary transformation, because that's what the whole story of creation is about. And that's what that quality of ourself, our own self, if we identify ourselves with our value of pure potential, we're identifying with the value closest to the absolute. And that value has within it, like integrated within its nature, this ability to change and evolve and transform and grow. So expanding. When we are in a relationship with another person, they form their own opinions of us that are a byproduct of seeing our essential nature and then translating it through the filter of their being. Because our nervous systems are all a little different, each friend and each family member, each person you know will reflect your essential nature back to you from like a slightly different angle from the angle which you see it yourself. So if this reflection brings you closer to, if it shines a light, their awareness shines the light on you, which is more aligned with cosmic evolution, then this is a relationship which is worth cultivating. This is an evolutionary relationship. And ideally, we do the same for them, that if you found that quality of pure potential in yourself, then anytime you interact with another person, you're shining from the filter of your pure potential understanding of self, and it activates that pure potential in them and supports their ability to gracefully evolve into their next better aligned or better, more perfect expression of their own divine form. If we're interacting with others whose vision of us creates more separation from wholeness, then that's not a good relationship. That's what we call toxic relationship. Toxic relationship. So the good relationships are easy, right? I don't think that we don't need to do any healing for the good relationships, because those naturally, spontaneously just unfold in a way which is powerful and beneficial and evolutionary. But it's the toxic relationships, it's the damaging relationships that we need to learn how to ninja our way around them in order to support evolution for everyone involved. Because as damaged as people can be, and there are people who unfortunately do end up being damaged in this world and then not being able to form healthy relationships, everybody has the right to evolve. Everybody has the potential to evolve. Everybody has that spark of pure potential in them. So I'm looking at that because yesterday there was a nice establishment of our relationship with that pure potential within us. And I'm just asking being now, we're starting to move into a healing part of today's session, is how can a person, assuming that all of us have a sense of our own pure potential, how could one who's got that sense support the activation of that pure potential in someone else for whom it is blocked? So as I look at the blockage, what I see is that the most damaging blockage is that of self-delusion. The worst is when a person is like, they're telling themselves that they have it all together and that they don't need to evolve, and they don't need to change, and that they're doing everything right. I'm thinking of an example of how it is possible. I've mentioned this in other relationship webinars, how it's possible for a person to convince themselves intellectually that they love someone. So they say, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. But their actions don't say I love you. And this happens. It happens in families that somebody that, like a parent says that they love the child, but they don't act like they love the child. They don't act in loving ways. They sabotage and abuse and mistreat and block the evolutionary process for the child, while at the same time with their mouth, they're saying, I love you. In this case, the person is completely convinced that they love the other person. They are convinced. If they're saying it with full feeling. They're saying it in full belief. I love you. And they believe it. They believe that they love that other person. but it's kind of, it's, in this case, this delusion is a byproduct of lack of connection with truth. Because if the words say one thing and the actions say another, we all know actions speak louder than words. So we just have to look at the actions, and then you know the truth. That's why it's not always necessary to say, I love you. It's not. It's, the reality is, if you really, really love someone, it's only necessary to feel. I mean, it's nice to also say sometimes. There are times when it's appropriate, but it's really, what's really necessary is the feeling. And the feeling of I love you is so powerful that it transcends speech, it transcends action, it transcends everything. It cuts through. Yeah, yeah, it cuts through everything, cuts through everything. So what we want to do in situations where we're dealing with someone who's deluded or self-delusional is to allow our own adoration of the truth, which is being, is self-interacting through every one of us and through every relationship. Everything that happens is the divine talking to itself. So adoring that allows you, because you can only do your own actions, right? You can't learn other people's lessons or do their actions for them. So it allows you to dive in and to tease out, I love that phrase, to tease out that thread of pure potential which exists in the other person. And the beauty of the pure potential is that it sits at such a fine level. It sits at a very deep causal level of the physiology, like right next to the absolute, that it's very gentle. And that's why it's appropriate. It is the appropriate experience for newborn babies, is to just be in that pure potential, because it's so delicate that its expression is ever appropriate for whatever the situation is. Its expression allows evolution to occur without overwhelm. I think at the end of yesterday's session, we talked about how, part of the healing for yesterday was to support the evolutionary process to unfold for each of us in segments, in bite-sized chunks that are just the right size, and then unfold sequentially, so that the process is as efficient but also comfortable as possible, and integration occurs at every spot. So you get a chunk of growth and evolution, and then integrate, and then another chunk of evolution and integrate, like that. And they build like building blocks, they build on each other. This is the value of utilizing or leveraging that pure potential as the foundation for the evolutionary process. And in the most difficult situations, this can be done. That if you have access to that feeling of pure potential in yourself, then you can also locate it in anybody else, anytime. And when you locate that pure potential in the other person and put your attention on it, your attention activates and enlivens it and supports the next interaction with that person to be such that it just helps bring them forward as far as they can go, gracefully, comfortably, smoothly, and successfully. And that's that. What else can we hope for in a relationship, right? Is that our influence on the lives of others is evolutionary in the highest and best possible way. Because everything we do with other people, we're really doing to ourselves, right? Because like the waves on the ocean, interaction of one wave with all the other waves influences the whole. And the wave's body may be as big as one wave, but the wave also has its oceanic body. The wave is the wave, and the wave is also the ocean. And so we want the ocean to also have full support. The wave wants to be fully in support of the ocean's intention, the move of the ocean wherever it's going. As I say that, I can feel the consciousness of our collective, of our group, spreading out into the wholeness of that relationship of wholeness with itself, out into the whole dynamic field of divinity self-interacting. And I feel as if there's this beautiful kind of gratitude and reverence and appreciation for our relationship with the wholeness of creation, like a kind of a dedication or devotion to our actions aligning with the needs of divinity, with the desire, with the intention, or the intentional flow or the evolutionary flow of divinity. And there is a very beautiful and important, interesting connection. What's happening is like a little, for us, is a little tiny step. Just like I was talking, what I was describing before of how to deal with somebody who's a little dysfunctional. It's like all of a sudden the table turned and now we get to be the dysfunctional person or we get to be the parts, I should say, not dysfunctional, but the parts as interacting with the whole, that just the intention to support the evolution of somebody who is not well, who is not mentally or emotionally well, or who's not able to maintain a healthy relationship. We're able to switch that around, that principle around, and apply it to our own relationship to wholeness, thus enhancing and supporting a much deeper, much more powerful relationship between ourselves and the whole creation. It's that dedication, it's that love. It's like, Mother of creation, how can I use my pure potential to enhance your glory through me? I'm getting a little comment here because that's a bit of a good point where as that energy starts to integrate for everybody, I'll read this question. Sometimes our wave action is crashing upon the rocks, and that is part of the feedback of the whole ocean in relationship to the world. So this lady's point is that sometimes good intentions, like the idea of dealing with a dysfunctional person, so I'm going to support and cultivate their pure potential. And what happens is the pure potential falls on the rocks of ignorance and just breaks apart. That wave of love breaks apart. Yeah, the feedback of the whole ocean. It's really true that ultimately every relationship is an opportunity to get universal feedback. So this was a point, thanks for bringing that up. That's from California, that the universe is evolving all the time. And we are moving with that evolution as best we can. But when we establish some alignment in ourself that's good at any given moment, that alignment will only be good for a limited amount of time, necessarily because the whole universe is moving. And at some point, wherever we've kind of aligned ourselves up and we're like, okay, I got this, I've got a nice stable foundation here, at some point it's going to change because that's just the way it is. So part of the work that we did yesterday was this beautiful healing for the intellect to support, to refine, to hone discrimination down to a very, very deep level and set up a system for identifying those precise parts of our inner structure, which are the next ones in line for evolution. Because the universe is moving with or without us, time waits for no man. And so we want to be right on top of releasing or letting go of attachment to any part of self, which is holding back that flow. And that's where the point of the knowledge, pure knowledge, breaking apart on the rocks of ignorance comes in. Oh, nice. Is that when a person has decided in themselves that they don't have a problem and that their true reality is, I love this person, even though I abuse them, I do love them, then what it means is there's some stuck energy right there. And that the illusion that they love when they are unable to act in a loving manner is, there's like a little blind spot, right? They're like saying, I love you, but the blind spot is there, so they don't even see it. They can't see that they're acting in an unloving manner. They can't see it. They can't see it. So that, where that blind spot is, needs to be cleared up. And that blind spot, and I'm just looking, because this is a universal form that comes up in all dysfunctional relationships, that there are these blind spots. Because most people, occasionally you get someone who's like, in work situations or corporate situations, you get someone who's a high climber and they're like, yeah, like I will totally smash that person in order to make it to the next level of, my next level of income or my next level of status or my next level of power. Absolutely no problem. Smash them to bits. And so in that case, in that intentional case, it's actually easier to deal with someone like that because they know what they're doing. They are actually honest with themselves. So when you've got honesty and truth going on, then that's actually an easier situation to deal with. When people are deluded and they have blind spots, they have, what do they call that? I can't think of the word right now. It'll come. Selective memory loss. When they have selective memory loss, they're actually blinding themselves in specific areas so that they can continue the illusion that they are being a loving person. So that's a little trickier. We need truth. We need truth to shine into the darkness. That's the key. And we need the Dharma matrix coming in order to do that. So what I'm looking at right now is the astral field, our astral bodies, which is the area of our self that interacts with the environment at a subtle level. That's like kind of a first level where we have a sense of there's me and there's the environment, really it's one, but there's some identifiable spots where we can say, yeah, I go out this far, like this is my edge, and then that's the scenery over there, So the astral level Dharma matrix. The Dharma matrix stands firm on the leg of truth, but it also has the pillar or leg of letting go or austerity, which allows for that beautiful, highly evolved intellect to support transformation where transformation is required, that next step where transformation is required for evolution. Letting go. You got to let go of the old to get the new in. And this is the point where we were looking just at the end of our session yesterday. That point where a person has to let go, it's scary. It's scary. It's scary to deal with that chaos, that feeling of kind of like stepping off a cliff kind of feeling. There's a sense of like, I don't have anything to hold on to until order is established. And so I'm asking being, what can we do so that consistently, because we're going to have to be in this situation anytime there's evolution between souls, anytime we have an evolutionary effect taking place in our relationship with others, there's going to be moments of that stepping off the cliff feeling. What can we do to support that process in a way that doesn't create stress? That's the thing. We want to do it with grace and successfully. I'm just asking being. Yeah. Thanks for following me, guys. I appreciate that. I know it's kind of abstract, and my hat's off to everybody for following. So I'm asking being, what can we do in that moment of stepping off the cliff to support that process, not creating stress in the system? Because I realize now that this move, if we can repair this area of our collective field of self as humans, we would be able to move forward on our evolutionary path oh so much more powerfully, oh so much more quickly and efficiently, right? Because when we're faced with something that's fearful, then there's like that clutching and holding back. So how do we do that? And where is that spot? I'm asking being, but I feel like I'm not asking the right question, sort of. Like I'm not getting quite sometimes, I get an immediate answer and sometimes not so much. So let me see if I can ask first, where is it? Where is it? Okay, so it's in the area of ego. It's in the area of sense of self. and we've got an answer coming in from England here too. God bless. I love you guys. I'm going to look at that in just a minute, but I'm going to go on my track. We both popped, me and the guy in England, we both popped our answers at the same time. Woo! My bro in England, man. Anyway, yeah, so ego, sense of self. The fear is losing myself. The fear is I'm afraid of losing myself. And of course, we got to lose the small self in order to gain the big self. That's part of the story. That's the way that goes. So the question is, then how can my connection, my sense of self, be so intimately connected to that unmoving, unwavering being that no matter what happens, no matter what pieces of my individual identification go under the knife, I can keep that sense of stability, and I know I have the resources. I am confident I have the resources to deal. So asking being that. Okay, so the answer that's coming back is, so it's really interesting. It's a little elaborate, so I unfold it for you. Yesterday we talked about Australia fires and death. We talked about 1 billion animals at this point, and probably this is 2 days later since my meeting with the gals on the Australia fires, and so most likely more than 1 billion. Very possible more than 1 billion animals now dying, and how there is a process that we go through, a grieving process, which is essential, emotionally essential, to support the transition of a soul across that barrier from being in their isolated, individualized form to being just the wholeness of creation, that release or liberation into wholeness that takes place when an individual passes out of the constraints of the physical form. And that emotional work we call grief. And part of the story is that anytime the smaller, weaker aspects of ego have to be released, we have a responsibility to take that grief step. We have a responsibility to go through the grief. And it's work. Just like bringing the child into the world is work, we call it labor. The grief is also a kind of labor. It's a labor that goes the other direction. And what's important about it, because I'm looking into grief, I kind of stopped going to funerals in my area after a while because I'm so moved at funerals. I am just so like intensely feeling. There's a lot of feels at funerals. That the grief is born of a recognition of that pure potential, the pure potential that soul possessed in this life, the opportunity that they had to be the expression of divinity, the opportunity, the role that they played to support the evolution of the divine in an individual form in this lifetime. It's a huge thing. And grief is the recognition of that. And it's also the recognition of it being done. So the small, weaker parts of ego that necessarily have to fall away when the cosmic ego is established, they are also divine being, and they also are deserving of love and recognition and reverence and adoration. And it's not our nature as human beings to think this isn't the way, this isn't like traditional thinking. This is us moving as we're doing this healing. We're literally moving into new territory at the same time, which is establishing a different type of belief structure or belief system around the concept of the evolution of ego, and how as small ego falls away, like as the rosebud dissolves as the rose blossoms forth, that is something that is not seen as, oh, that rotten little old thing, I didn't want it anyway. No, no, no. That's also divine being. And it played a part. It had an essential role in your existence up to that point. And so that also is recognized and honored and grieved over, appreciated, seen in its value as wholeness, seeing it, grieving, and seeing that departing soul in the light of wholeness literally paves the path for them to reach wholeness. That's why we grieve. That's why we grieve. We're helping. We're like midwives, only from this side. There are many subjective experiences that a person can have when they leave the physiology, depending on their level of consciousness. Many different types of subjective experiences. Some people experience a world that's not so different from this world, where they still are themselves and they feel like they still have their body, only maybe it looks younger, and they experience themselves interacting with other beings and so forth. Some people go into really dense locations. Some people, most people take a big, long drink of silence, because that silence of being provides a context of order in which to understand the chaos, which is the transition, that evolutionary transition from living in a human body to not being in a human body anymore. When we grieve for those who have passed on, we, with our attention or awareness, we knit or forge together a path between what we know them to be and what they've been in this lifetime with that long drink of silence, that pure potential, that infinite unbounded ocean of absolute bliss consciousness, which is a good place for a soul to rest after a long, complicated life. Everyone deserves that. That's why it's very nice it's nice to have those that we love grieve for us when we pass on, because they support and they help us find our way back home by doing so. But even if a person dies unremembered or alone in some way without family, that process is often taken up, depending on their level of consciousness, will often be taken up by souls on the other side of the veil. And there are plenty of those of us here and there who are doing that on both sides of the veil, which is also useful work. It's also precious work. It's a job. It's like being a hospice worker. Yes.
How does grieving relate to sending love? Because you're supposed to send love to someone.
Oh, thank you for the question. The question is, how does grieving relate to sending love? Because he's heard that you're supposed to send love to the beloved as they pass over. Really, grieving is a form of love. It is. It's okay. Thank you for the question, because I think that has the potential to be analyzed more deeply. When we love, what do we love? We love the evolution of divinity as expressed in that other person. You know, we may think the object of love, we may, oh, I love that person's face, or I love their personality, or I love their talent, or I love this or that about them, but that's not what we love. I mean, those are just superficial expressions. Those are byproducts of the essence of the person. The essence of each person is the opportunity for divinity to evolve through a point of perception in this field of wholeness. Each one of us is a point of perception in the field of wholeness. Yes. So This is what we love. And when we grieve, what we do is we recognize that. We recognize that essential component that that person was. And love, oh man, love is an activation. Love is an activation of the causal field. It's when I look at love at the causal level of the body, what I see is something that looks like a kind of a matrix at the causal level, or I would say um, it's an integration of the causal and astral levels of the physiology, where there's a kind of a system of connections between many regions of the causal field. It's like the difference between hearing somebody sing or play an instrument a cappella, just one melody, versus hearing the fullness of like a ginormous orchestra with 150 voice choir behind it. Love is like that in the causal and astral realms. It looks like a kind of a system. I've heard people say it's like glue, right? Because it connects, but it's an orderly overlay that sits upon the astral and causal fields of self that knits together all the different regions in such a way that they function in a completely harmonious manner, like that big orchestra with that 150 voice choir, that they're working so coherently that the appreciation of that person's full potential is reflected from a level of collective wholeness back to them. It's huge. It's huge, and it's really, really, really beautiful. And it's real. It's real. And people can feel that because it's that quality of love is so, it's so precious, and it requires such a depth of orderliness of thinking and expression and experience that it's not that common that a person gets hit with a tidal wave of love like that. I mean, of course, we love all the people in our world, right? And I love all of you. But who feels the tidal wave when we love, right? I feel if I love, I just said I love you and I go, oh, there's a tidal wave of love. But who feels it? I feel it. I feel it. How can I express it? Can I devote my life to you? Can I do anything? Can I live my life so that every breath is devoted to your well-being and your evolution and your healing and all that is good for you? Yes, that's what I do. That's my job. So it can be interpreted at the gross material level as action. But we love them when they're no longer here. We can no longer, cook them a meal or take them on an outing, or we can no longer do things in the relative with them when they have passed away. And so the love, that tidal wave, has to just go to them through the finer levels, through the astral level, because that's the level we connect. And I really, this is like a setup for the next webinar, because the next webinar, we're going into some whole brand new like technologies for ancestral healing, which should be really interesting and fun, because we also touched on that a little bit yesterday, talking about DNA and proteins, but not too many spoilers right now, but just letting you know that that's coming up. But for those who have passed away before us, those tidal waves of love are actually tangible for them. The grief comes from our own experience of realizing that we can no longer give that person a hug. We can no longer say something to make them smile or be with them. We can no longer do an activity with them. We can no longer say with words something. So the grief is a combination of the love with that sense of loss. And I found that losing people that I love very much, family members I love very much, the grief was born as much from my own personal sense of loss, I would say more so from my recognition of their cosmic status. That when a person finishes their life, you actually get to see totality, unboundedness, constrained within the boundaries of time within a single human life. One, day of birth to year 79 or whenever. And when you see totality encapsulated into the boundaries and limitations of a single human life, that's so beautiful. It's like a beautiful work of music bringing you to tears or something, but it's a human life. It's so beautiful. Grief and love. Grief and love. Yes.
And that tidal wave of love is a tidal wave of soma.
Oh, beautiful point. So his point is that the tidal wave of love is a tidal wave of soma. So he's putting soma together with that tidal wave of love. I'm looking, because he's bringing up the new territory, everybody. And so I can only reflect from my understanding too. It doesn't mean, you guys, it doesn't mean that what I say is absolute, because we are pioneers and we are actually forging through this new territory together. So, if we look at soma as the entire roll of the wave from the unmanifest up through manifestation, then back again like that. And that in that roll, there are different like grades or flavors of soma. The first manifestation has more sattva, and then more rajas, and then more tamas, like that. The grieving process contains them all, because the grieving process contains even the tamasic side of that roll, when it's just dissolving back into being and you've lost someone. Love. I'm not getting a really big, clear connection. My mind isn't integrating it very well. What can I say? I feel as if the love is kind of I come back to what it looks like to me, you guys, and that is, it looks like a kind of a systematic connecting, harmonious connecting of the aspects, the finest aspects of our own being and our own physiology at a very, very deep level. So causal and astral level, it's like the whole thing gets knit together into this big, beautiful, coherent form. The wholeness. Remember, I was saying in the causal field, there's this tide that runs back and forth between the wholeness of the causal body and the parts of the causal body. But love, what I'm seeing I see it as like kind of an overlay into that area where it has this sort of knitting effect where it brings all the different regions, all the separate regions of the causal field together into a harmonious chord. If I had 150 voices, I'd sing it at you right now, but I can't. So we have to sing it to ourselves. Oh, that's what we do, because we are a coherent group and we are quite a lot of people. Maybe not quite we could easily be 150 here because in some places there's more than one person listening. So what we're going to do is we can just sing it. We can do it. We can do this. Okay, so kind of like a little guided meditation sort of thing. Even though I'm not the big proponent of guided meditation, seems to be the logical way to handle this. Is quieting awareness down to the deeper levels, feeling into that finest feeling level, that heart-centered feeling level, which is the causal field. And take a moment and think about how precious it is to be alive. How precious it is that we have the opportunity to be source evolving in ourselves. We're just going to offer that gratitude and appreciation into the silent wholeness, back to Mother Divine, back to the big wholeness, the big self. And this love, we get a chance to feel the resonation of the love. Feel the way the love knits together all the different varied expressions of our own emotional feeling structure at this fine level. All the laws of nature are there. So our love is feeding the fine structures of self. That's something Soma does, by the way. Soma is the food of the gods, right? It feeds the Devata, it feeds the intelligence that resides in the causal field. So from that angle, I would say that would be a big yes. And what I'm feeling is little threads. It's like the causal body is an ocean, and that these little threads of fear that are just flying out of the ocean. So it's making a purification. Because we are affecting the whole. When we affect our causal bodies, we're affecting that body of ourself, which connects to all the other bodies in the whole universe. So little threads, like little threads of tar or something, are releasing out of the causal field. That's so interesting. Wasn't expecting it. And the other thing is, I'm seeing for some people that the ability to bring forward that feeling of love, that 150 voice choir, everyone singing the same note at the same time. I see. We need an object. It's not enough to loop it back into wholeness, because wholeness is too abstract. Okay, so this is good. Use your own body. Each of us use our own body as the point of wholeness. And think of yourself as your best friend. You are your best friend. You care about yourself. You work in your own favor. You support your evolution. The body, the physical body, is the best friend, the point of object of your love. And as that happens, what I'm seeing is, for a lot of people in our group, there's stabilization and strengthening of the immune system. So the tendency and ability to be able to self-protect is increasing. That's good. Also, I'm seeing some clearing in the eliminative, particularly the lymph nodes and the whole lymphatic system. There's some clearing of blockages there. The ability to let go is increasing, so that sense of self is the dominant focus of one's love and attention, and therefore anything less than that can be released. So you're not burdened. So some burdens are being released off of the being from many levels, not just at the physical level of the lymphatic system, but also finer levels like emotional and mental and even astral. We're releasing burdens that have been carried by the physiology for a long time. For some people, that is in the form of like dramas, which those dramas are connected to small or ego elements. But I still feel that when the cycle of love rises up in oneself and it affects to one's own physiology, that this still isn't the full potential Ma. I'm saying to the Mother of the Universe, where do we focus? Where can we as a collective focus this love so that we really make the tidal wave roll? Like we really, really create the tidal wave. I'm asking if it would be good to take a current event, you know, like the fires in Australia or something, or the ocean animals. The ocean animals are good because they have an understanding and comprehension of love that is quite fantastic and very much outside the box of what we experience as humans. So we're going to focus our big collective here. We've got this system set up. We're going to focus to the whales, the dolphins. We're going to focus to them and send them a big tidal wave of love. Now I can feel the waves moving, because it's really good to have an object. This is how creation creates, right? Divinity could do it within itself, but within itself, it's not big enough. It's not cosmic enough. It's not profound enough. And I'm also seeing a certain amount of this love radiating out. When we sent to the ocean animals, two things happened. One was that they got on board with us to help manipulate the weather patterns to bring more rain to Australia, a nice, soft, soaking rain to Australia. So we're all on board now as a big healing collective, ourselves and the great wise beings of the ocean who are dedicated to the well-being of Earth as well. The other thing that happened was an extension of the love going out to cosmic form. That means the first thing was to the planets and our adoration of the planets and our adoration of their role as our teachers. Guru. There are like 6 planets in Sagittarius right now, which is ruled by Jupiter. There's a lot of action going on in Sagittarius right now. So we're just allowing that tidal wave of love to stretch out to our cosmic body, the planets. This, I see, is why divinity decided to do this through us at this time, is because our wave of love moving out to the planets integrates our relationship with our own cosmic body. And this is a precursor to the download that's coming tomorrow, or I'd say tonight, in the Western world tonight, in the Eastern world tomorrow, which is a realignment of humanity with nature in a way that has not been, and has, I would say, has not been respected, has not been recognized as valuable up to this point. I'm watching the knitting together. What do they call that? Music of the spheres. We've got the orchestra and the choir singing to the spheres and bringing together, knitting together our relationship with our cosmic reality. This is so powerful. And it's so, oh, Capricorn, she says. Yeah, lots happening in Capricorn too. But anyway, yes. Okay. All right, my beautifuls. We just have minutes and we've got these fabulous questions that came up. So let's see where we're at. I feel that sometimes is not even a blind spot that disallows you acting the way you wish. It's like, you know, you're not acting in a way that's loving, but have no control. Whether that's loving to self or other, does the microbiome play a part here? Causing us to act against our best nature, because we know that that does happen with regards to feeding ourselves, that a lot of times if the microbiome isn't healthy as it should be, the microbiome will cause cravings for foods that are not necessarily good for the body. So here's what I'm seeing. There it definitely happens for people that have a relationship with an environmental substance which is destructive. Like that definitely happens. I'm not saying that this person is doing that, but because he does have the experience of it, but I know that that's one, you know, measurable situation where, for example, if a person drinks alcohol, essentially what they've done is they've invited that negativity that's associated with that particular substance into their home and said, do what you want with this home. I'm not gonna stop you. And so we get people who have made that choice, who have, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily always alcohol, but there's a type of choice that we make of just saying, well, you know, this world is chaotic, it's got problems. I'm just, instead of trying to fight the problems, I'm just going to invite them in and we're going to have a party, right? So, because that is one way to work with the sort of destructive energies of creation, the destructive tendencies. I would say that discrimination and measured regularity is a better way to work with the destructive energies, such as anger. You know, and I've talked a lot about that. You can also look up anger on my knowledge base and get a little healing and a blog and some more information on that. So I won't go into it now, but I think that's the that's the key right there, is whether we're having a relationship with a darker, more destructive energies in creation, which is a relationship where we've kind of handed over our authority to those darker energies and they get to have their way and do what they want, or whether we're doing it in a way which allows us to work with those energies with their power and with their ability to break down and allow us to let go of stuff that we don't need, like working with it that way in like a super discriminating way. And I know this guy who has this question, and he is one of the smart, really smart people in my world. So, you know, I know that he's probably already working with it in that way. So that could be this could open a door for like further discussion, my dear. Next question. Beautiful and thanks. Love the exploration of grief. Yeah, right? Grief is labeled quite often as depression and medicated, not allowing grieving, blocking the way to divinity. Wow, good point. One of the things about grief, points about grief that I didn't bring up, it's not really my point, it's actually my teacher's point, and that is that we should only grieve to the degree to which it's really natural to grieve for somebody. Because if we go beyond what's natural for us, then we kind of bind them a little bit or hold them in place, and or hold them back even from evolving forward. So, you know, I just would like to add that in the grieving process, tying into the previous question, in fact, it's good to still use discrimination. So the feeling of grief can be a kind of overwhelming, almost out of control feeling. But if we're able to maintain a little bit of ego, healthy ego, cosmic ego, sense of self, in that grieving process, we're able to self-refer and feel like, I guess I grieved this much for this person because this is what my heart really felt about their loss, and now it's done, so I don't have to grieve any further. So part of the story is that people sometimes are overwhelmed by those more intense feelings, and I think that's when they get frightened and they go to doctors and they're just like, you know, I lost this loved one and I can't seem to get over it, and, you know, can you give me drugs, something like that. Necessary to explore other types of blocks in relationships besides delusion. I have it all together: honest egoism, selective memory loss. Right. So yeah, that selective memory loss is a real bear. Looking into that, my response is we have to use our own responses, our own feelings of discomfort in dysfunctional relationships to support our ability to set healthy boundaries with people, and know that even though others might not think they want boundaries, that if we're setting boundaries which honor our own inner truth, those boundaries will be evolutionary for the other people involved, whether they believe that or not. Whether even we believe it or not. If we're following our own deepest truth at that moment and setting those healthy boundaries, then this will be the step or the action which yields best results and most success in the relationships with others. And a lot of times, if we're not setting healthy boundaries, the result is anger or fear or anxiety, but most often anger. Most often when anger comes up, that is the indication of myself to myself that I haven't set a healthy boundary where I should have. And so if one can respond to the angry feeling with, oh, it means I need to set a boundary somewhere, where should that go? Where does that need to go in order to support an evolutionary transformation in this relationship? And then offer the boundary with measured regularity and, you know, being nice. What, to quote Mr. Rogers, be nice. Let's see what else we got. She's saying a lot is happening in Capricorn. Yeah, all these planets that have been in Sagittarius are now moving over to Capricorn. So it's like, okay, the party continues in the next sign. So wonderful to have moments of silence and meditation with you and the collective here. Thank you. But does the biome create the alcohol or whatever craving? Well, yeah, sometimes that does happen because there's that autobrewery syndrome. So it can happen if a person has an over excess of certain types of yeast in their gut area. It will cause starches and sugars to turn into alcohol inside the body. And so that can definitely play a role in the relationship between the individual, the indweller of the body, and the indwelling consciousness of the microbiome, also influencing actions, behaviors, reactions, thoughts, feelings. The microbiome produces neurochemistry that is akin to our own neurochemistry, which is directly like neuropeptides, which are directly associated with specific feelings and thoughts and emotions. And so, sometimes the thoughts and feelings we're having are literally created by our microbiome. And it feels like our own thing, but it goes through those hundreds of thousands of neural connections in the gut area directly to the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve connects everything else in the body. So it's like we are working together as a collective. And of course, we didn't talk a lot in this particular webinar on relationships, about our relationship with our own microbiome, but that's another area okay guys, fun with time. We can bring awareness to the causal field that allows us to work with time and let that tidal wave of love that we were engaging with earlier go now to the microbiome as well. Go back then to the microbiome, so that as it extended out to the cosmos, it also extended into our vast and amazingly complex and widely embodied microbiome. So the microbiome also receives, and that's very nice. I actually have an offering on my website that includes this. It's like a little exercise. Everyone's welcome to check that out as a freebie. It's called the Digestive Mastery exercise. And with that, my dear friends, I think we have come to our time. So I thank everyone for being with me. I thank all of you for joining together, joining the voices of our hearts together to create this tidal wave of love, which benefited us and also benefits every other living thing in creation. I'm so grateful that we get to do this. It's always like the highlight of my month. Bye, everybody. See you soon.